Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Godbout. I'm a professor of neuroscience at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center. And so I was asked to highlight a little bit about my research and what I do at OSU. So I think some of the first important things that I do are involved with graduate education. I'm the co-director of the neuroscience graduate program, as well as a co-director of an NIH T32 training grant with Phil Popovich. I'm also the faculty director of the chronic brain injury program. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these things in the next few minutes. So in terms of research, I'm interested in this intersection between psychology, neuroscience, and immunology, which is a coordination of multiple systems, looking at problems in sort of three dimensions, using psychology, neuroscience, and immunology. And this is in general called neuroimmunology. So my expertise is in neuroimmunology. One of the things that I do is co-director of this NIH T32 grant with Phil Popovich. This is for graduate students, and it trains 4 students per year. And it's really a collaboration between many faculty members within the Neurological Research Institute, including the IBMR, Institute for Behavioral Medicine Research, the Chronic Brain Injury Program, the Center for Brain and Spinal Cord Repair, and the Belford Center. So I think in total we have about 15 basic science mentors and about another 15 clinical mentors. And what our goal is to do is to provide training, comprehensive training in neuroimmunology, and this includes many different important topics like injury, autoimmunity, stress, aging, development, and we have very specific training programs for students to professionally develop, and they can go off and do a postdoc and continue their career in neuroimmunology. We're one of the few places in the country that have this type of training grant in neuroimmunology. The other thing I am is the faculty director of the chronic brain injury program. And so this is what we're trying to tackle in terms of a major problem is chronic brain injury. And so to do this, we really need an interdisciplinary collaborative program. And this one is funded by the Discovery Themes. And so we have 20 faculty hires, over 5 colleges, 13 different departments, and over 80 affiliates of the program. And we have a lot of different things that we do, including we help fund grants, we help support students, we have community outreach, and we involve in grant writing and other activities for the faculty. So this is my research lab. Anytime you give your talk, you always talk about the people in your lab, and we haven't been able to take a picture this year because of COVID, but we've generally had a lot of graduate students, undergrads, postdocs, technicians, and we've been well supported over the years, and we collaborate with many other labs on campus, including John Sheridan, Phil Popovich, Dana McTighe, Nikki Kokaiko Cochran, Candace Asquith, Andy Fisher, Daniel Efferman, and Leah Piter. So one of my interests is in traumatic brain injury, and this is where I apply some of my neuroimmunology expertise. And we know that TBI negatively influences lifespan and health span, and has far-reaching effects on both the survivors and their caregivers. There's a very limited understanding of the progression and chronicity of CNS injuries, and this limitation impairs the diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. Therefore, it's sort of critical that we understand the nature and course of traumatic injury and improve detection and develop new treatments and interventions. And traumatic brain injury is a lot like an iceberg. If you look at this sort of metaphor, and some things we can see on the surface, but a lot of things we can't. And it's what lies beneath the surface that often worries us. And if I leave you with just one fact today, it's that 75 to 80% of all individuals who have a brain injury continue to have cognitive behavioral complications. That's a striking number. And there's over 5 million people who suffer long-term instances of injury. And these aren't even serious injuries. So we know that they can lead to cognitive dysfunction, potentially development of neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's disease. TBI is associated with concentration problems, a very high risk, about 10 times more risk of depression, anger issues, sleep issues. Then we know that there are life and social impacts with how people feel, whether they can return to school. Some people cannot return to their jobs. They worry about finances. There's also higher incidence of using alcohol and drugs of abuse. So really a major health concern. And one of the things that we see in humans is evidence of inflammation. So inflammation within the brain. And these are some studies by Dr. Coughlin at Johns Hopkins, looking at former NFL players, relatively young individuals have some series of concussions, and these little images here, these heat maps are showing you more inflammation well after their playing days. And there's another study here in 2011 showing the same thing. This is particularly tied to a certain cell type in the brain called microglia, which are the macrophage-like cell of your brain, and an immune cell that has the capability to be involved in repair processes, but also generate inflammation. So in my lab, we try to model this, and we use mice. So I'm a basic scientist. So we use mice. We provide this, what's called a midline fluid percussion injury to mice. And the reason that we do this is that it really gives a nice concussive injury where we get forces going down and pushing the brain back around. Very similar to what you see sort of in this type of injury with the head moving back and forth within the skull. Sorry about that. And what we see with this model is widespread neuronal injury and inflammation. So we can recapitulate some of the things they see in humans with this injury. And these are the microglia. And what we've seen in our studies is that, not surprisingly, if you have a head injury, you get inflammation, right? That's not surprising. But what happens is that a lot of this remains unresolved. For some reason, the inflammation doesn't go away. And this underlies some of the problems that we see with cognition and behavior. So we have a certain level of these cells that remain sort of unresolved. And sometimes I think they even become dysfunctional. Either way, this represents something really negative happening within the brain after a brain injury. What we found in our work that's been published is that these microglia are the primary drivers of this persistent inflammation in our TBA model in mice. And then if we start to interfere with this pathway, we can reverse a lot of deficits that we're seeing in neuronal plasticity and cognitive decline. Neuronal plasticity is sort of a fancy word, but it really means it's sort of the health of the neurons, your main cell that's involved in brain to body and body to brain signaling. And this is just showing you some structural differences we see 7 days after injury in the mice with the TBI. And we're seeing some reversal with our inhibition. This is a drug that basically will inhibit or ablate the microglia of the mouse. And we see differences in some spine density, just a marker of plasticity. We also see that the mice have cognitive impairment. They don't have it initially, which is really fascinating. So you see that over time, the mice develop some cognitive impairment, and that this is reversible. If we target this inflammation driven by the microglia, we reverse that cognitive decline. And these data are going to be published very shortly in the Journal of Neuroscience that we're very excited about, showing that microglia have this key role. And with that, what are we doing now? Well, we're very interested in this pathway called interferons. Interferons are involved in antiviral responses, and you generally don't think of them in the context of injury. But in a series of our studies where we use pretty high-tech analysis of the transcriptome, of what's happening in the RNA within different cell types, we saw this pathway, interferon pathway, highly activated and prolonged. And we're very interested in this pathway because it has a profound effect on macrophage-like cells. And our unresolved cell type here may actually be something that's called prime, which puts a cell in a more kind of pro-inflammatory state. And we're seeing this persist within the brain. So this allows us, our work has allowed us to figure out a druggable target here, this interferon pathway. And we wrote a grant on this idea. And we just recently received word that this grant is going to be funded. And this is a grant on looking at the chronic and evolving inflammation after TBI, with the connection between microglia priming and neuropsychiatric complications. This will be funded by the NIH. So hopefully I've been able to tell you a little bit about me and my research of interest. You can find me at www.godboutlaboratory.com or email me at OSU.edu or the Godbout Lab. Follow me on Twitter, Godbout Lab at OSU. So thank you for your time.